August 15th. My name is Sherry Taylor. We're here at the Finksburg Library and we're talking with Ed Magin. So Ed, tell me, how long has your family been farming and where is your farm located?
Well, we've been, the Magin family really, I guess, has been 4 generations of us, and we were located in Taylorsville area. And we actually had our wormseed distill in the Taylorsville area. For about roughly 50 years, we distilled there.
And wormseed was your primary crop?
No, well, it was a major crop for us. We grew about 50 acres, I think, between all of my grandfather and my uncle and my dad, all of us around. It was around 50 acres, and one time we probably farmed close to 500 acres between all our family.
And what other things did you?
Well, we had raised wheat, and corn, and of course wormseed, and then we had beef cattle, and then we raised, actually we done some truck farming. We raised sweet corn and taken that to Baltimore and Washington. We raised tomatoes. We taken that to Baltimore to the canning house. And we had really taken some of the produce to Baltimore and Washington both. My dad did.
Okay.
And then, let's see, what else did we raise? Well, they were major crops. And of course, wheat. And then I think we had some oats that we grew along. And my uncle, we grew strawberries, picked them, and we used to grow peonies to take to market on Memorial Day. My dad, he cut them and have a bud, just when they're in the bud stage, and put them in cold storage, and we put them in wooden orange crates back at that time when we take them to Washington, Memorial Day. Sell them, and my father used to sell Easter flowers even too, on Easter.
So when you were growing up on the farm, what was a typical day like?
Well, when I was growing up and I was going to school, I had a project. I belonged to the FFA, and I had a project, and one of them was I raised wormseed, and I think at that time I had, my uncle bought the oil from us because he'd buy oil from, and at that time I got $800 for my project raising wormseed. And then I raised, my first project in school was a sow and 10 pigs, which I'd bought and lost money on by doing it, but I bought a sow with 10 pigs and raised them until they were full grown then. And then the next project was my wormseed, or I think the wormseed was the last project, and I had beef cattle too I raised then while I was in the FFA.
So when you got up in the morning, what kind of chores did you have? What did you do?
Well, when I had the animals, and of course we had cattle, sometimes we had to feed them in the morning then. And of course, if I was going to school, I'd go to school, but then if we had the animals to feed, and when I come home, a lot of times if I come home in the evening, we had to be cutting wormseed or making hay, or which was during the summer mostly, or straw, but in the fall it'd be picking corn then, helping with that.
Now, do you have brothers and sisters?
Got one sister.
Okay. And she pitched in and helped on the farm too?
No, she lived in Westminster. That was a little bit different situation. My aunt and uncle raised her.
Okay.
It was a family situation there happened.
So, how are things different today with some of the things and the chores that you did on the farm and the way things are?
Well, things are a lot more modern now. I mean, the bigger equipment, bigger tractors. I mean, everything is a lot bigger than when we were. And then, of course, when we raised this wormseed, it was a slower pace. I can't imagine us going out with a wagon load of wormseed now, going out 27, probably get run over because you had to go slow. But what we did do, we had a vehicle in back of the wagon and tractor going out, so they know it was something going out the road.
So how do you harvest wormseed? What do you do?
How do you harvest it? It had to be cut, but everything had to be done by hand. It had to be, it was transplanted to start with a transplanter like you would tomatoes or tobacco or anything. And it got probably the same height as a tomato plant, and you'd pull it and transplant it then. And of course you had to, when you had to hoe it or cultivate it just like you would any other crop. And then when it come time to cut it, you used a two-bladed thing, something like a tomahawk, but it was two-bladed and you had to cut that by hand. And then you let it cure. Then when it was cured about 2 or 3 days, it was dried. Then you had to take it was a fork and you had to load it at night or early morning. Reason for that is your seeds would fall off. You had to have a dew to load it, okay? So when it was loaded, then you had to take it out to the distill and we distilled it then. That's the whole process in itself then.
Wow. So now, what did your father, how was life on the farm different for you growing up than it was for your father growing up?
Well, I think things got more modern when my dad, I mean, he started out, I think way back, they probably had horses in. And actually, I got some pictures here where the horses, you know, were actually come into the still with horses at one time. And they started probably with the horses in the beginning and they went more to the tractors. And you know, of course, your combines and too were, I mean, you had the tractor pull the combine, now you got a self-propelled combine, which we got later on too. And eventually, we had thrash machines that thrashed the wheat and everything, and ended up, when my uncle had a museum, actually he fixed it up before he passed away, and actually the thrash machine tractor for that was taken down to Harris County, and I actually seen them thrashing with it down there, that we actually had. I went to a farm museum down there in Harris County.
Yeah, you said you had a tractor that was 4 generations?
Well, it was, all of us was on a tractor. But it's 4 different generations of the Magins then on a different tractor.
Wow, wow.
So my grandfather actually started the wormseed distill, and then my dad and my uncle taking over. My dad was, they called him, his real name was Francis, but they called him Buck. And then my Uncle Donald taking over, and then it was running 24 hours a day, it still was. And my uncle run it, Donald run it at night, and my dad and my grandfather run it during the day. 24 hours a day, but never on Sunday.
Wow. Wow. So, wormseed sounds like it was a pretty good...
It was, well, we had actually a monopoly on it. I mean, the soil here was ideal. It's a weed, okay, it is a weed. But it was used for worm medicine and parasites and everything, and actually way back in the beginning it was used in humans. It was used in paint, it was used in perfume.
And when did they stop using that?
We stopped in 1966. Our distill was probably one of the last ones here in the county, and now there was one over in Kemptown that kept on going till probably 78. And actually ours distill stopped, like I said, in 1966. And then it was tore down in 1980. We was trying, we really wanted to bring it to the farm museum. We was going to give it to them. But the county said, well, you got to pay for hauling it. So that actually didn't happen. So that's where we're at. But we're in the process now of getting it still at the farm museum, Carroll County Farm Museum. We're working on it right now.
So what is it about farming that you think?
Well, it's been in my blood. I mean, and once you get farming in your blood, it just don't go. I mean, we grew up with it. I mean, that's part of being in your blood, I think. I still enjoy it, even though I live in Westminster.
What was the best part of it?
I think the outdoors and being outdoors and the being out with nature and seeing things grow and enjoying life that way. I don't regret growing up on a farm one bit.
Now, most of your friends were from farms when you were growing up?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
And did you guys kind of work together?
Yes, when we worked with the wormseed, I mean, we had the family working with us, neighbors, I mean, everybody come in to help do that because it'd taken a good bit to do that, to load it, and they all pitched in.
Now, did you guys go to like different farms and everybody kind of
Yes, ma'am.
this farm?
Yeah, yeah. Back then, a lot of people worked together, and actually we, even with the wheat, my uncle used to combine for, custom combine for different people. Even with the thrash machine, We used to take that around to different farms, and then of course you got the combine, and a lot of people didn't have a combine at that time. We even take that around the combine different people's crops in.
Now, how has the area around the farm changed much over the years?
Yeah, like most places, a lot of houses now.
Yeah.
I got one cousin still on the farm out of the ones we had. He still farms.
So, what is like maybe your favorite memory of the farm growing up? Something that was really cool that you did, or
Oh, I just liked the open air, I think, and some of the work, been working on the farm. A lot of it was hard work, and some of it wasn't. Like it being out in the open.
You said you raised beef cattle and you got $800
No, that was for the wormseed oil.
for the wormseed. Okay. Okay. That was a lot of money then, wasn't it?
Yeah, back then.
That would have been when? Back in
50s. Mm-hmm.
For a young person, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, see, that wormseed oil was sold by the pound. And it went from, I mean, it varies. I mean, I don't know whether I got $4 a pound, I guess for it or something. I forget now without looking. But, I mean, it ranged. I think sometimes it was clean up to $11 or something a pound. And, of course, it kept going down towards last then. And synthetics taking the place of it. That's why we don't do it anymore.
So, how much plant material was needed to get a pound of oil?
Well, that could vary on the stalk itself, or, you know, the weather had something to do with it, or to give you a good answer on that, I don't know.
But it's not a direct ratio, I mean, it's...
No, it could vary, yeah. Because you're dealing with little seeds that actually cooks then to get the oil out of it. It had to be cooked, steamed. And there are kettles that you put the worm seed in. It was actually, ours was 7 foot deep and 6 foot wide. We had 2 of them.
And 24 hours a day.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, how many people did you have working?
Well, actually, my dad had 2 hard men, okay, and my uncle had 2 hard men. And then my grandfather was in with us. And then, of course, like I said, my uncle had children. Of course, Dad had me, and the children helped. And then a lot of neighbors would help a lot of times, or they all pitched in.
Did the distilling process or the harvesting process change from when your grandfather did it to when you did it, or was it?
Yes, we started out to cook it. You started out with coal, then we switched over to oil. And as far as you know, getting the steam up from it, we switched there then. Yeah.
And then you would replant every year?
Yeah, you'd use the seed and they'd make a bed. It had to be made in, you make a new bed in a wood lot. And you clear the wood out, what you could. I mean, sometimes you couldn't get all the stumps out. And that way you used fresh soil that wasn't carrying no weeds, okay? Because you didn't want no weeds to come up with your worm seed you sowed in. And you go into this bed and pull these plants out and put them in a bushel basket and transplant them in.
Okay. And did you use did you rotate beds year to
year?
Yeah,
you'd make a new bed each year. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, what do you think, I mean, farming today versus back then, do you think there's anything that's been lost with all the technology? And how, you know, I mean, the equipment's better and everything, but
yeah.
We lost some things along the way, and what might that
Well,
be?
I'm sure we have. We've lost, you know, the worm seed itself because synthetics taking the place of it. I actually had a gentleman come down from New York this spring and want some seed, okay? And he was from a pet company. And he had an organic farmer, and they want to go organic with the worm medicine, apparently. So, who knows?
Might make a comeback.
That's right.